Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's Inspiring Leadership podcast. And I'm delighted to have my old commanding officer and an old friend of mine, Major General Lamont Kirkland, CBE. And Lamont is the founder and the CEO of Team Forces. Without further ado, Lamont, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, now I love the fact that when we were talking, it's typically you. You don't want to make it about you. It's about the people you support. And you are very fulfilled by the work you do and what you've set up here. So we are going to make it about the organization that you've created and you support and the people that you help. We're going to talk about specific people. But Team Forces began, I understand, from Team Army. You got the concepts of both of them going. Tell us a bit about it and what it does.
Yeah, I will, but I'll just come back on that point that you raised. I don't make it an aim of mine to talk about me and myself. It's kind of not who I am. It's not my personality. I'd never write an autobiography, and so spending an hour talking about me, I just find that really dull, despite what other people might think. And so when you asked me to come on the podcast and talk about me, I said no. Until you found the connection, Johnny, until you said, but will you come and talk about the people you support? Aha. Now that changes everything in my line, because what I do is help other people to fulfill their dreams. This is not about me. This is what I do for them. So I'm very happy to talk about that.
Yeah, and it's great because actually I did recall, God, must have been about 15 years ago. I said, would you be in a book I'm writing? And it's about leaders and their experiences. And you went, possibly. What are you going to call it? I said, loving leadership. And you went, no,
No.
no, you can't have loving leadership. I said, well, okay. And then that made me go away and think about inspiring leadership, which has been the whole of my work ever since then. So actually, I owe you a big thanks for your wonderful challenge. As always, you make people think, and I'm sure you do this with many of those that you sponsor, to not just take things as they thought they were going to be, but could there be a different way of doing it? Or how are you going to raise your game? And I certainly remember as one of your company commanders, we often swapped ideas between us and learned from each other. But you also helped me raise my game. So I just want to publicly acknowledge that and say thank you.
And I remember that exchange. You said, be in the book. I said, okay. You said loving leadership. And I said, definitely not. Sorry, you've contextualized me in entirely the wrong way, or a way that I don't wish to be framed. And I would hate to think that, I got into that book under that title, and when people Googled me, that's what would appear. So I was not for that at all.
No, I'm very glad you did challenge me, and inspiring leadership has been my work, and inspiring leadership in the people I meet. And you do this with so many people whose lives you've touched, and they in turn touch others. And I once said to someone, and it really resonated with me, and I think it's similar to you, I get fulfilled by touching the lives of people I may never meet.
Okay.
And that's what you do as well. These people like Darren Edwards and Johnny Huntington and Harry Buddha go out there with support and sponsorship from Team Forces, from all the different people you get to donate to the Team Forces through Just Giving. Make sure you do if you're listening to this, in 132 countries around the world. And they touch the lives of other people, either through their physical endeavor of what they've done, or when they give a talk, or they're on LinkedIn or something like that. So, yeah, tell us about Team Forces and Team Army.
Yeah, we're going to get there, but you keep raising points, and I'll come back at you. Touching the lives of others. So Harry Buddha and the story of his climb to the summit of Everest, which we enabled and helped to manage, that reached, according to our media company, had a global media reach of over 2 billion.
Wow.
Now, you just stop and think about that number for a second. The planet is what, 8 billion? Let's say half the planet is not connected to the internet. So when my media company is saying, Lamont, the story that you launched, when you got to the top of Everest, reached in a week 2 billion people.
Wow.
My God, we are having global effect. That the adventures and expeditions that we enable from Team Forces has that degree of impact. So I completely love that. That is why I know we are reaching an extraordinary audience with the adventures and expeditions that we help make happen.
And I think it's such a lovely counterbalance, and I'd be interested in your views on this one, to the likes of Donald and Elon Musk and their versions of leadership. What you're marketing and encouraging and role modeling is a very different kind of leadership, don't you think?
Absolutely. Like I say, this is not about me. This is about people that we inspire to be their very best of the version of themselves.
Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. No, love it. Okay, so let's go on to Team Army, Team Forces.
Back to where we started. So look, I joined the Army to play rugby and go on expeditions. I was inspired by John Blashford Snell and by an old boy who joined the Army and played rugby for Scotland. So I'm sitting there as a 16-year-old thinking, sport, expeditions, this Army thing, I'm in. Whatever it takes, I'm in the Army, right? That's my future, because I'm motivated by these two features of my life, which were important to me then. And here we are, a few years later, with a military career sandwiched in between, and I'm now running an organization that supports sport, challenge, and adventure. So you can guess from that narrative that I'm now living the best version of my particular life. I'm living it as I want to, in my own image, because I recognized that this needed to be done. Now, the impetus was that I was in the later stages, having played top class rugby and international athletics. I ended up as the chairman of Army Rugby and boxing and winter sports. And the common denominator was money. All sports need money to improve, go on tours, get better equipment, training, physiological support, you name it. And the most obvious source of money is the defense sector, because as an industry, they care more deeply about helping the armed forces community. And what I recognized was that actually, if we needed to professionalize the way we approached industry. So rather than them being approached by, Army, Navy, and Air Force rugby, and then you multiply that by 45 sports, actually what was needed was a single conversation to the defense companies that said, once a year, why don't you just give us a lot of money and let us worry about where it goes, and let's care about how you get portrayed in this version of the story, about where your brand's going to appear, about what profile you're going to adopt across different areas, and that we will guarantee giving you the benefit of what you need and want out of this relationship. And so it became, in a military term, effects-based sponsorship. Let's hand over the money and let's stop worrying about that. We will now deal with the money, but we will focus on you, the business, and what you need. So that was how Team Army started as a concept. And then we needed an organization to deliver it. And the MOD quickly judged that this was best delivered by a business at arm's length from the MOD. So there's clear blue water between the Ministry of Defense and my business. There's no commercial connection at all. And so we sit offshore. We sit at arm's length, but if you like, to borrow a phrase from another industry, we're authorized and regulated by the MOD to deliver the service on their behalf. And quite quickly, Team Army became a huge success, inside and outside the Army. And naturally, we had to diversify. It was the right thing to do. And over time, we became Team Forces, which is where we are today.
Yeah, fantastic. And when you said offshore, I'm imagining you're at a nice home in England rather than sitting in Cyprus and sending
absolutely
sending nasty notes and getting rioters going on. But that makes a complete sensible story, and I can see how there was a gap when I was in the forces. Before you set up, it didn't exist, and how being that go-between between it all, and also helping all these individuals who are focused on their particular sport or their challenge, whether it be Everest or going across the Atlantic, and really they have no experience whatsoever of how to get the sponsorship or all the different people to talk to. That's not their focus. They just have to be a bit like the Olympians are just being now. They have to be single-minded. And I've had a couple of Olympians on, and just I had one the other day, 2 gold medals in bobsleigh for Canada, and she was also Rugby Hall of Famer. And Heather Moyes, fascinating lady. But she had to be single-minded about her sport, and that was just, it was her everything. And that's where I imagine you're a very good partner with them.
That's exactly what one of the other many reasons why Team Forces exists. We started out with sport because that was where I most safely landed. But it was a few years later until we started to widen the aperture of sport, because I realized actually, when people undertake personal challenges or expeditions, either as teams or as an individual, it's largely the same people who've been top-class sports people who've had that mental approach and drive and determination to get to the top of the mountain or to the deeper sea, because they love that sense of achievement that they've got from sport, and it's just carried over into challenge and adventure. And so it's largely the same group of adventurous people. And I very quickly segued the business into helping not only serving sport, which is where we framed it to begin with, but we just widened the boundaries out and out and out. And today I'm really proud to say that we support military children's charities, through to Forces wives charities, through to armed forces sport, and then that community when they undertake an adventure, an expedition, or a challenge, and now through to the veteran community, particularly those who now suffer from physical or mental well-being issues, who want to pursue a pathway to recovery through the medium of sport, challenge, and adventure. And here's the thing: what I realized along the way is that when a defense supplier, a sponsor, puts their name behind one of these expeditions or challenges, they get on the back of the Harry Buddha 2 billion experience, because actually the story of individual endeavor is so interesting to people, particularly on social media and news media, that the magnification of that to the sponsors is actually much greater than supporting Army athletics or Army rugby or Army boxing. It's just a truism. Sport can hit the highlights in Olympic seasons and Paralympic seasons as we are now, but often it's just routine sport business. It's okay, it's fun, it needs money, but it doesn't provide quite the same sense of explosion of interest if you're sponsored something that is amazing.
Yeah, and also it's taken me back to episode 200, which we had our old commanding officer Richard Dannett when he spoke there, and we talked at the time about Help for Heroes. And a year ago, I cycled with Help for Heroes across all the battlefields in northern Europe, First World War and Second World War, including my grandfather's old Battle of Ypres. And I went through the Menin Gate and listened to the bugler, and it was very moving because he was in the Honourable Artillery Company, in A Company of the 1st Battalion, and he received some horrendous injuries, which really, although he made it through the war, didn't really live that long after in a very comfortable way, probably PTSD, I think. But that whole thing of whether it's Help for Heroes, which was started with a real need because the forces didn't have enough resources, and now we're seeing the armed forces with even less resources at a time when there's a global war about to brew in World War III. It's probably going on right now, if you believe some people's opinions, how you define whether warfare is going on or hybrid warfare. And as resources are even scarcer, I think the Ministry of Defence can't turn their attention to what you provide. Everybody's so busy doing their day job. No one's really covering this, are they?
And they shouldn't really. I mean, we are fortunate in this country to live in a great partnership between the public sector and the third sector. And Help for Heroes was a perfect example of the third sector stepping in when the government, was unable to, or perhaps, shouldn't have done. And of course, what Help for Heroes then went on to do, having focused on rehabilitation, was to then fund a lot of the groups, the veteran groups and serving, who set up sporting organizations to care for their recovery pathway through the medium of a sport or a challenge. Now, Help for Heroes is a very different charity today than it was then, and they've got different funding priorities today, which means that a lot of the groups that set up and thought, oh, this is great, we've got money forever coming in for Help for Heroes. Well, sadly, it stopped. Probably that that the umbilical cord was broken as we came out of COVID. And that's when we stepped in to say, oh, hang on, there's an opportunity here, because here's a group of people who have now got an expectation of future funding from the third sector. And Health Heroes appropriately rebalance their own priorities. They're not doing that anymore. Well, we can. Actually, we can. And do you know what? Our defense suppliers, our partners in industry, love stepping into that void. So that's partly driven the explosion of our breadth and depth in the group of beneficiaries that we help, and that was the reason behind it.
Yeah, and also you've touched on your own journey with John Blashford Snell inspiring you with the rugby and the adventure and the Scottish connection. But for people who aren't in the armed forces or haven't served, what are I've seen it with your career and, you know, some of my career with the long distance running and things that I did in mountain marathons and stuff. But why is it that people who do sports and challenging adventure things are so well suited to the armed forces, and also are so well suited when they go out into business? What are the attributes that you find come through time and again?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of top class sportsmen go on to become very successful businessmen. I'm sure there's a portion that don't, but there's certainly a thread that you can draw in top class achievement in one area, factoring into another. And I think it's always been true in the armed forces that because they've been an organization that promotes undertaking sport and challenge and expeditions, it's bred a culture and people who have that adventurous spirit and are prepared to take risks, to understand risk envelopes and be more balanced when they do take risks. And it suits the armed forces culture to want to do that. But what I recognize, again, is that the public purse was less willing to support these types of extreme endeavors. And maybe that's right. And so again, you know, we fill a void. So we, you know, we're going to talk about Polar Preet, Captain Preet Chandy, MBE. We really bankrolled her challenges to a large degree in the early years. She's moved on now. She, you know, has her own source of funding. But if it wasn't for Team Forces, she wouldn't have been able to do the things that she was going to do, because the army was limited in its ability to help and pay for what she wanted to do.
Yeah, and that brings on a really great follow-on question, which is like, give an idea to people listening of just the depth of the hole financially that has to be filled when someone does a polar expedition or climbs Everest or rows across the Atlantic or many of these other amazing things that your beneficiaries are doing. Just how expensive can it be?
Yeah, I'm very happy to talk numbers, but they're six-figure numbers in most cases. And back to a point you raised earlier that I meant to follow up on. Again, one of the impetus, you know, why me and Team Forces is because I completely recognise that the sports person or the, you know, individual undertaking the challenge, you know, has the necessary skills to do what they want to set out to do, but what they lack is the ability that I can bring, which is that I've got access to people who've got the money, right? I mean, and I'm good at fundraising, and that might not be their skill set. In fact, it rarely is. And so what we're doing is we're marrying those two elements together. It's my purpose in life to bring money in so that these adventures can be supported. Sometimes we're doing it generically because I know things are going to happen. In the case of Zara Lachlan, who called me only about 8 weeks ago and said, "Hi, I'm 21. I'm an ex-World Bexy, and I'm going to Sandhurst, and I want to break 3 world records in rowing across the Atlantic coast to coast, and I want to do this in a few months' time. Can you help, General?" Now that's quite an immediate fundraising target, because that's a 6-figure fundraising target inside 8 to 10 weeks. And I'm happy to say that I've done it. You know, we are now there. The boat has been purchased. The funds have been secured. She's out there as we speak, training on her boat, ready to launch herself into the Atlantic in mid-October. And again, there's a perfect example. She's 21. She simply could not raise £100,000 in 10 weeks, but she's now speaking to somebody who can. And and she apologized for making the call. She, called me one day in the car. And I was otherwise, thinking, well, I've got an hour's journey here. I might as well listen to whoever this is. And I said, well, great. How did you hear of me? And, someone had made the connection. How many calls have you made? No, you're my first call. And I hope you can help. I said, and I'm sorry if this is inconvenient. I said, no, what you don't understand, Zara, this is really helpful. I need people like you so that I can help you. If the world was full of people that didn't call me, then what's my purpose in life? So thank you very much for cold calling me today. This is great. I've now got another focus and energy that I can throw at this over the next 2 months.
That makes me smile, because one of my guests I had on recently, he said, as you try and create a really healthy culture where there isn't the sort of arrogance we see in Trump and Musk and other, like Boris and Liz Truss, where there's a humility, which is something that you have, along with a nice mix of drive as well. But it's a lovely combination. But he said there's 10 words, 3 phrases, which mark out those who've got the right level of leadership humility. First phrase, I was wrong. Second phrase, I don't know. Third phrase, I need some help. And few people in their careers can sometimes do that. I had General Sir Rupert Smith, as you remember him. And he said, often people try and make out they know it all. He said, I was once Deputy Supreme Allied Commander Europe and was called into a briefing, and they said, General, what do you think? And he said, I sat in a chair, put my feet up, and said, I don't know. That's why I hire you guys. What do you think? Oh, okay, right. And so, but I don't know whether that idea of being open enough to ask for help and to know when there's certain things you don't know and that you might have got something wrong, and to come back to the start point where you did know where you were before you got things wrong. Does any of that resonate for you?
Well, I can tell you this, that I didn't know I'd end up here. When I started Team Army in 2010, 2011, having the first thoughts about it, working it through with the compliance and governance team inside the MOD, I don't think I had any conception at that point of what the future looked like. I knew I was onto a good thing. In the sense that the idea was the right one, and in good old ministry speak, this idea was novel and contentious, and therefore had to be scrubbed and wire brushed several times before all the civil servants came back and said, actually, General Kirkland, this is quite a good idea, and I think we can make this work. It was so much better than what went before, which is that people in uniform, handing a big contract to a defense supplier and saying, oh, by the way, can I have some money for tiddlywigs? Because that's what I do. And right, stop. Neither of you need to be in that conversation. You need someone else doing that on your behalf collectively. So what we invented was so much better than what pre-existed. But in the sense of not knowing, I had no idea it would become this big. And in the words of a friend of mine, catastrophically successful. That we are today, we all seem to be in a rather existential moment, wondering whether it's got too big, too large, there's too many companies that we're providing services for, and that there's a danger of unfulfilling expectations and dilution. Somehow we manage it, and we're on a nice, gentle growth pattern and curve, certainly since we came out of COVID. And so we're in a very pleasantly, rising tide at the moment. I just hope it continues to do so. We've had to take on, some new staff. I mean, we're tiny, by the way. We're so
How many?
We're 5 of us full time. Just taken on a part-time pair of hands. I like to keep it small. And my leadership style is keep this very small as possible, because then you've got control, of all the moving parts. It does mean I have to pedal quite hard, maybe harder than I wanted to at this stage in my life. But it is, as you will have guessed, entirely fulfilling, and it has become my defining purpose. And I think what I achieved during the army is now paling into some insignificance against what I think I'm achieving now as the CEO of Team Forces.
It's a real vocation, and that sense of leaving a legacy in your lifetime, rather than my old company sergeant major at Sandhurst who screamed at me, "Sir, you're a legend in your own lunchtime," which I think was an insult. I'm sure it was, along with "What's your village doing for an idiot while you're here?" When I'd turned to the right rather than left. But I think it's just fabulous what's going on there. Let's have a talk about some of the people you support, because if I read your website correctly, you've distributed over £14 million to these people. So we particularly went in discussion, you and I talked about Pola Preet, Harry Buddha McGar, Johnny Huntington, Darren Edwards, and Zara Lackland. Zara and Harry we've had on the podcast, but I would love you to talk about both of them. But anyone you want, let's begin with them and just tell us a bit about their story and how you and your very small team in Team Forces were able to help them.
Yeah, each of them to their own, all individual stories. And I love them all for what they do. And I'm just so delighted that we can help them fulfill their own particular set of dreams. I guess we should start with Preet. She is now globally known. That she got in touch with me through the great platform that LinkedIn has become. I mean, God bless it. Again, this is a post-COVID version of LinkedIn. It's such a great way of communicating and finding people. And she found me through the platform. Very soon we were talking. I didn't meet her, of course, COVID times, until 8 months later, almost, I think, at her launch event. But she explained that she had this burning ambition to trek solo and unsupported to the South Pole over the winter of 21-22. I said, that sounds great. How can we help? Well, that needed, as ever, a six-figure sum of money and some expedition planning and training schedules. And critically, because she was a completely unknown quantity, I had to kind of verify her credentials because she had no polar experience whatsoever. So I set her up with Captain Lou Rudd, who was someone else that we supported in his Antarctic endeavors. He became one of the first men to ever traverse across the entire continent of Antarctica, ex-Special Forces. And I said to Lou, would you take this lady under your wing, show her the ropes, take her on an expedition, and come back and tell me whether she's the real deal? And he did all of that. And he came back, said, yeah, Lamont, amazingly as it sounds, this 33-year-old woman of Punjabi descent, Indian parents, born in this country though, had the physical and mental attributes to do a solo endeavor to the South Pole. And so once I'd had that kind of seal of approval, we set about arranging the rest of her schedule for that year. And then we're working with the Antarctic Logistics Expedition Company, who manage the on-ice safety and risk management. Between us, the expedition was launched, was highly successful. She got to the South Pole on the 3rd of January, 2022. It became a global media story in a month, in a week where nothing else was happening. It became the best good news story on the planet. The world was craving for interviews. She was marooned at the South Pole because the pilot of the little aircraft that brings them back to the base station, the pilot had COVID. So she was stuck at the pole with no means of communication. And suddenly, my phone went. I'm skiing in France, and the phone goes, and it's the BBC, and they say, General, we understand that you were behind the Polar Preets expedition. I said yes, and they said, well, we can't get hold of her. Can we get you to do an interview? I said, well, look, it's not about me. No, but you're the only person who can talk about it authoritatively. So I said, fine, crack on. And I thought I was talking to one of the regional news channels that this might go out on BBC Midlands, but they so liked the segment that it went out as the second piece on the BBC 6 o'clock news that night, and to a global viewing audience of 6 to 8 million people. And my phone began to ring red hot off the hook. So people said, "I've just seen you on the news," And I realized at that point that, we had a story on our hands, that actually she had captured the imagination of the world in doing something quite extraordinary. But what it said about her, and of course she's doing this for the people she represents, women from the subcontinent who need to be shown a role model, that you don't have to live a life suppressed, held back by your religion, by your family culture, by a male-dominated environment, that you can go out and break boundaries and do extraordinary things as a woman, with Punjabi Indian descendants. And she was really doing it for them as much as anyone. But what I delighted, was that what it said about, recruiting in the army, particularly from communities that are hard to reach and underrepresented. That she became the poster girl for army recruitment that year. Not surprising.
Yeah. Do you think the different people you supported, whether it's her or Harry or Darren or Johnny or Zara as a young Welbecksian going to the army, it's really helped the army in its recruiting, showing its diversity and its support for people, even when they've received horrific injuries while serving for Queen and Country, or now King and Country?
I think it's very important, and indeed, I would say to the army, I said, look, this project needs to be completed. Trust us to manage and fund it, and do the bits that you can't. But the benefits should fall to the army. This is actually about, Captain Preet Chandy, from an army medic, being supported by the army in her endeavours. I think that's a really powerful statement, and I think that was borne out by most of the press coverage that she got.
Yeah, it did. From my view as a layman, it definitely did. Fantastic! What a great story. And then, what about Harry Buddha-McGar? I mean,
Yeah,
on the podcast, but you also have seen a whole side to him, and you helped him make it possible.
We did. Now, Harry has been, dealing with adversity and overcoming his own personal challenges in that, as he will have told you himself. And
but do tell the story briefly about how he happened to get disabled.
Yeah, well, he lost both legs above the knee in Afghanistan back in about 2012, and suffered not only the physical injuries but the severe mental well-being issues that come with being disabled in a country that doesn't look well at people who have disability. So I think that's the truth of the subcontinent, India, Pakistan, I'm sure Nepal. But he suddenly realized that he was going to be a disabled person in a country in which he would not be well regarded. So he struggled during the teens years with that. And it wasn't until about 2019 that he suddenly felt actually he wanted to demonstrate not only to other Nepalis but to himself and the world at large that disability is no bar to achieving great things, and that he wanted to demonstrate to the world what can be done with a disability, and he wanted to climb Everest. He then came up against the Nepalese law, which then banned people with disability going onto Mount Everest. So he had to take his own country's government to the Supreme Court in Nepal, which he then overturned in about 21 or 22, which then paved the way for him to set his sights on climbing. Then he needed the money. So we work alongside an agency, a sports agency, who was representing Harry, and together we helped fundraise the significant amounts of money that were required to put Harry onto Everest, with a kind of a double team of porters, if you like, because his gait is so much reduced when he's walking on stubbies that he doesn't walk as fast as other mountaineers. And so he doesn't reach the heights in the same day as others. And therefore they have to have more stops on the way up Everest, and more oxygen, double team of Sherpas, you name it. It's just doubled the cost of the whole expedition. Anyway, he got there in mid-May last year. I've already explained, the social media hit it became, and the worldwide personality that Harry has become as a result of it. He's a wonderful guy. We love him to death. He's a great supporter of ours now, and he's off on further adventures now, trying to take his Everest climb. And he wants to climb the seven summits of the planet. and he's on about summit number 4 right now. So it's he goes on, and we will continue to support his journey.
Yeah, and he also had a great mate of his who was Gurkha, but also Special Air Service, I seem to remember, or SBS, who was always quietly in the background, and he's doing some amazing things with other people. I think across Greenland is the next expedition. But a lot of the people who are ex-special forces keep their profile very low, but they do some amazing things. And I imagine you help them as well. You've had your few.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is that the case that they just have to keep quite a low profile, but yet they need the funding? It's a funny mix.
It's their choice to keep profile low. I mean, I hope I can say on this platform that there was a small special forces expedition which summited Everest this year. All able-bodied, members of the UKSF community. We couldn't talk about it. We couldn't publicize it. And so it. In a sense, it was a Team Forces story that never got told. We were one of many sponsors on this particular occasion, but they got there. But it's been quiet ever since. I don't think anyone actually knows they got there. Yeah,
no, that's great. So from Polar and Harry to Johnny Huntington.
Yeah, Johnny has been well supported by Team Forces thus far. He was part of an expedition with Darren Edwards, who we're going to come on to. And a group of disabled servicemen and ex-servicemen canoed, kayaked from Land's End to John O'Groats, a 4-man expedition a few years ago, and we supported that. Johnny, who joined the army, was a young officer, had a brain bleed, left him paralyzed down the left side. And so he's had hidden injuries, if you like. It's not very visible, except he walks with a limp and a gait that you can see. And when he came to me and said, Lamont, right, my next trip, I want to walk solo and unaided and unsupported to the South Pole. I said, oh God, Johnny, really? I mean, you struggle getting upstairs, mate. Can you really do that? And I went on to say, I said, look, before we do that, I need to do the due diligence. You need to pre-qualify, and you're going to have to do something solo and unsupported of great distance, length, and endurance. Now, if you can do that, come back and tell me, and we can discuss. So he went off and ran round the Southwest Coast Path solo, and as a journey of 630 miles. I'm sure many people know it. I think you climb Everest several times in the process, and he did it in kind of record time. And he came back and pinged me on LinkedIn and said, well, what do you think? I said, okay, I'm super impressed with that. You have demonstrated to me that you can undertake a very serious and significant physical journey. So, right, you're in. Let's get behind you. And off we go. And he will set off on his expedition in November this year to be the first disabled adventurer to make his way to the South Pole solo and unsupported.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to. He wants to come on the Inspiring Leadership podcast, and I'll definitely support him and encourage people to help him through Team Forces on the Just Giving site on your website. I presume it's sort of teamforces.com. Is that?
Yeah, you can find us Team Forces. Yeah, charity comes up straight away.
Yeah, great. So that's a nice connection between Johnny and Darren Edwards. So what's Darren Edwards' story?
Yeah, Darren was a reservist, a Special Forces reservist. He broke his back in a climbing accident in about 2014. He's paralyzed from kind of chest down. So, quite a high fracture, and therefore the degree of paralysis is quite significant. And like so many people who want to overcome adversity, except he has a spinal injury and he's wheelchair bound. Again, his mind started to explore the possibilities for what can be done even with those with spinal injuries. Now, he was a climber and an adventurer and an explorer, so he knew the skill set, and he had the mental skill set to explore boundaries and overcome adversity. And he came into our recognition through leading and dreaming up the kayak expedition from Land's End to John O'Groats. Having done that, he then came back to us and said, right, and I want to complete a marathon in a wheelchair in 7 continents within 7 days. It's called the World Marathon Challenge, and I want to carry your flag around there on my wheelchair. And he was going to be a first of class doing that, first ever wheelchair bound explorer to do that, which he achieved. He's since gone on to do a 3-man expedition in the northern polar regions on a sit ski. And how do you do that? Well, there's a degree of dragging, but with his exertion, and they covered an extraordinary distance and raised a lot of money for a spinal charity. And then he came back and said, right, I want to go, sit ski to the South Pole, get dropped in and do the last 3 degrees, about 180 miles. And that was going to happen this year. He's had to postpone that by about 12 months, and that's often the case with these expeditions. It doesn't always run to plan, and so he's come up with a new thing, which is adaptive adventures, and he's setting up an organization that will help other people with spinal cord injuries overcome their own particular adversity and follow a recovery pathway through the medium of challenge and adventure. And he's behind that. And, he should come on your podcast and tell you all about it.
Well, I think that's just so inspiring. And before we go on to Zara Lachlan and her 3,600 miles plus, because that's just a straight line between Portugal and French Guiana, you must have picked up in your own way that you look at things and analyze it and just see some themes and trends. All these different people you've supported, what kind of qualities do you see that they have that seems to be a thread running through them? That you can then, as you start to interview somebody else, you start to go, I think they have these qualities, or they seem to be missing a number of these fundamental qualities. I don't think this is going to be something we will, because I presume you sometimes turn them down, don't you?
Oh yeah. I mean, I have to do the due diligence on everybody. And sometimes, as I think I've explained, they've got the idea, but they have got no track record, or I sense that they're underprepared, or they need training experience. They need to demonstrate that they've got the whereabouts. But there are some, and many actually, that we turn down. I mean, we give out well over $1 million a year. We help and fund well over 100 beneficiary groups and individuals. Most of them are quite straightforward, but it's the individuals or the sort of 2-person expedition that need that degree of care and attention, because we're taking a reputational risk when we put our name behind anyone or any group, and therefore yes, a certain amount of due diligence has to be conducted. And is there a process? Well, no, because it ends up being me talking to them, and because I come from that background, because I understand what it takes. I'm still an explorer, an adventurer myself. I have never stopped exploring. I think I told you earlier that Helen and I are going trekking in Peru in September because I have to do something every year. I still ski. I ski tour and mountaineer, going hut to hut. I deal with avalanche risks. The last trip I was on, people got killed within a few hundred yards of me. So I'm still doing this, me personally, and therefore I completely understand the adventurer's mindset, and therefore I know when I'm talking to someone who's kosher and someone who's dreaming and doesn't need our support.
Yeah, and that is just. Before we go back to talk about those kind of the qualities you sort of see, some kind of red thread running through these kind of amazing different people, whatever they're able-bodied or disabled. Have you had disasters on some of your expeditions, and how did those people, with your help or on their own, get through those disasters? Because nothing ever runs smoothly. No plan survives the first meeting with the enemy.
No, I don't think we've had a disaster. We've had people who didn't get to the end. And indeed, Preet Chandy, on her second expedition, when she was attempting to do a traverse of the entire continent, and in the process was going to go further than any human being in history. She had to be airlifted out of Antarctica on about the 70th day because she'd literally run out of time. But she'd also run out of energy, and she was not able to continue. So we had to make a qualified judgment about where the plane was put down so that she could reach that. It was quite a nervy time for us all. She was now in a spiraling down medical and physical and mental situation wasn't good, and she will, readily say that. We got her out in the nick of time. It was the same day that the previous explorer who tried to do that, he died on that day, day
goodness.
70, back in 2014. He was a Special Forces Army colonel, who was attempting to do that. And so that was the record that she overtook. So she went further than he had, and then broke the world record for the longest solo polar exploration. Now, she bounced back from all of that in a most extraordinary way. And the following year, she went back to Antarctica when we said, I'll bet you're never going to go there again. And she did something which was utterly unexpected to everyone. And she broke the speed record for the female soloing to the South Pole by about a day and a half. So she holds, if you like, the 100 meters record and the marathon record, the same person. She is just extraordinary. There's no stopping her. And I know she's out there now planning and dreaming up her next expedition.
Yeah, that's just fabulous. And then talking about another female in a minute would be Zara. Qualities. What do you see as these themes running through this? If you were to pick out the kind of qualities that you've now seen works with the people who've succeeded these, would they be the kind of qualities you'd expect from someone joining the forces as a soldier or as an officer? Or are they unusual qualities which you don't see in many people you've led in the military?
Yeah. I had to make quite a quick decision about Zara. I think I mentioned that she cold called me a few days before one of our major events. It was the Army Navy rugby match at Twickenham this year. She told me about herself on the phone, and it was the degree of confidence with which she was speaking to me. And she explained that she was a known rower. She'd won medals at the World Rowing Championships. So rowing is not the problem for her. And I knew she was already embarked on a rowing program. But the question was, does she have the ability to do a single-handed row across the Atlantic, 4,500 miles? Has she got the mental capacity and robustness and resilience? Because that's actually what's going to be called upon, not necessarily your physical ability to row a boat. You're going to be, 3 months at sea on your own. And you're a 21-year-old, how is it even possible you've learned that, resilience along the way? Because you're just not old enough, right? You probably never faced that degree of adversity ever in your life, and you haven't even yet gone to Sandhurst. So we haven't even tested whether you've got that. I had to make quite a quick call. I invited her to come and speak with a group of other speakers at the Army Navy rugby match, and that's what we do. That's our house style. So in the room, we'd already heard from Polar Preet, Johnny Huntington, Harry Buddha-McGar had already spoken. I said, and ladies and gentlemen, finally, I'd just like a quick word from Zara, who's going to introduce herself and tell you all what she's going to do. So there's 500 people in the room, and she gets up, and I think it would be safe to say that she stole the show.
Wow.
Now, given the quality of the people who everyone had just heard from, people who'd actually done things, and this is Zara, who's 21, saying, this is what I want to do. There were gasps of astonishment in the room. And because she's ex-Welbeckian, she's a technical officer, she's got a degree in physics from Loughborough, she will go to Sandhurst next May. The commandant was also in the room, who heard her speak, and her journey will be from Sandhurst into one of the technical arms of the Army, technical corps. I think it would be safe to say that there was a lineup of major generals representing those technical arms and services who were very keen to press their business card into her hand before she left the room, saying, please consider, in your future life, joining my bit of the Army. So impressed were they by her just talking. I mean, that's all everyone got. Because of 4 minutes of Zara talking, and that was it. Everyone was in her spell.
Yeah. No, I so see that. And it's lovely that you had Zach Stenning there. I'm assuming that was who you were talking about as
Yes.
the commandant, through lovely years ago, seeing him as a young officer coming into our battalion, and so proud of him that he's the commandant. He's been through a lot himself. But I think this is a lovely way to, in a moment, to share your top tip, which we'll do at the end of it all. But anything else that you'd like to share or talk about, some people who are about to do some things, or anybody else you'd like to give a call out for on behalf of Team Forces who are doing amazing or have done amazing things?
Yeah, at any one moment in time, Johnny, we've got a number of plates spinning. A lot of these people are well, most of them actually we've talked about are all either having done something extraordinary and now planning their next challenge because they've got the bug, right? I mean, it's quite difficult to get it out your system, and clearly we've got Johnny Huntington about to embark, Zara's about to embark. But there are others, but we've given you a very good selection of people, at all ages here today. But we do support an extraordinary range of groups and communities out there now. I love what we do for Forces Wives Challenge. Heather Sharp, I'm going to give a shout out to, former Army officer and Army wife, who recognised that nobody was doing anything for wives in the armed forces, who often suffer their own mental well-being issues when the husband's away or deployed or on exercise, and they're left at home. And what she's created is a first of all a safe place for women who will undertake challenges and adventures at the level at which they're comfortable. And she's now got a growing program, which I'm delighted that we have been fundamental in helping to grow, because we pumped money in through our sponsor network. So our sponsors like the story that she has told. And, I've introduced her, I've given her a speaking platform time to time, and interest has grown in her thing. And she's a founder, and you ought to get her on a future podcast.
Well, it will definitely. And Lee, my wife, does the Inspiring Women Leaders Program. And definitely Heather and a couple of the other women that would be fabulous. We're going to have Zara on there as well. But look, this has been fabulous. Thank you, Lamont. So would you just, for the final couple of minutes, as a standalone piece, just introduce who you are, the business you're the CEO and founder of, what it does, and then share your top leadership tip for people around the world?
Certainly. So I'm Lamont Kirkland. I'm a retired Major General from the Army. And today I'm the CEO of Team Forces. I joined the Army to play rugby and go on expeditions. I'm now in that phase of my life where I'm giving back to those who want to do something similar to me. I'm completely fulfilled by my purpose in life. And my top tip is do something in which you feel passionate about, that inspires you to get out of your bed every day and do something. I am at that part of my life where if I'm not interested in doing it, then I wouldn't be doing it. And so this really matters to me. And my passion today is inspiring others to experience the spirit of adventure and the power of sport. Thank you.
Fabulous. Well, Lamont, thank you. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the Inspiring Leadership podcast. We will continue to support you and people that you think are suitable to share their story to get out there to the world on the Inspiring Leadership podcast. And I would once again say that if people want to help this amazing work that Team Forces do, be you a CEO of a business or something somewhere, if your business would look up Team Forces and donate on their Just Giving site, they would really appreciate your support. Or maybe you'd want to be one of the big sponsors and have your logos on some of the boats or skiing gear or whatever people have. But I think it's a fabulous way of giving back and inspiring the next generation. So thank you, Lamont.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be on.